D.H. Lawrence said these words: "I wish to have two lives, one in which to make all my mistakes, and a second to benefit, to profit by them." The sad fact of the reality is we have one life. This is not a rehearsal. So maybe the Red Hot Chili Peppers, to go from the ridiculous to the sublime, this life is more than just a read-through. The most powerful, the most valuable thing that you have to invest is your life. I'd like to spend a little while this morning thinking about the power of example. What do we do with our lives? How do we invest them? We see this in the life of Jesus. And so in Mark 1, next slide please, Andy. In Mark 1, we read these words: "Come, follow me." If someone said to you, what was the key to Jesus' ministry? I wonder what you'd say. I know once upon a time I would have said, oh, well, it was his teaching. But as I've got older and hopefully wiser, I wonder whether his most powerful thing was his life, the life that he lived. I wonder for the disciples, whether it was the things that he said to them, shared with them, or was it just being with Jesus, which was the transformational thing? It's easy for us to forget because we've just got those 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and we kind of assume, or it's easy to assume that, they were going from place to place, and Matthew, Mark, Luke and John would say to the disciples, right, we've run out of paper and we've run out of ink, so nobody say anything until we get to the next place where we can buy more paper and more ink. All that happens is we need to write it down. So no one say anything profound. Jesus don't do anything. Of course, it wasn't like that. We've just got a fragment of those 3 years that they spent together when they were walking together and talking together and fishing together and sailing together and sitting around the campfire together, maybe staring up into the heavens, and the disciples going, mate, look at that. What a fantastic thing, when I marvel at the work of your hands. And Jesus is lying there thinking, you have no idea what it took to put that together. So with Jesus, it wasn't so much do as I say, but more do as you've seen me do. If you've read the bulletin, you'll know that I refer to this passage in Acts where Peter and John are going to the temple, and they get confronted by the teachers of the law, which happened quite a lot. And as the end of their conversation, came to an end, they walked away. And the rulers and the elders sort of turned to one another, and it's recorded out, they say, they noted that these people had been with Jesus. Was it because they looked like Jesus? And here's, when they say they noted that they'd been with Jesus, was it because they'd all sort of got the beard, or the robes, or perhaps even the sandals? Or could it be that Jesus had spent quality time with these guys, and somehow, as happens in life, Jesus become imprinted upon them? I used to love going and see my grandparents when I was a kid, and when I went to see them, there were times when I was sat at the table eating the food which always seems to have cabbage as part of its makeup. Why do grandparents do that? I don't know. I can remember sitting at the table, and I can remember listening to their conversation in the other room because I'd been naughty or something, and I was eating on my own. And as they were talking, there were times when I couldn't tell which one of them was speaking because their voices over the years have become similar. Their intonation have become the same phrases they would use. I couldn't tell them apart sometimes, and that even happened. They used when they were in front of you. They had the same facial tics and expressions, and in my grandmother's case, facial hair. Grandma Fuzzy was, as she was known to us as kids. Just joking. I don't know why I said that. So Jesus spends these years with his disciples and becomes imprinted upon them. Further into the New Testament, we encounter this guy called Paul and his friend Timothy. And Paul became a bit of a father figure for Timothy. Timothy was leading a church in Ephesus. It was a tough gig. Next slide, please, Andy. And it was a really tough assignment for Timothy. And Paul writes to him, and he says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young." The phrase here is used for anybody under 40. So that's good news for a whole bunch of you, and for the rest of us, But the essence of the passage is simply this. It's an older guy, a more experienced Christian speaking to a younger Christian, someone who is trying to do the best job that he can. And so he says, but be an example. And the word example here in Greek, for those of you who get a thrill out of this, as I do, is this word, it's tupon or tupos. Which is the word for example or imprint, a mark that's made. In the Gospels, it's the word that's used for the nails that go, the mark that the nails make in Jesus' hand. It's an imprint. Let these things be imprinted on your life. And in so doing, invest it wisely. Be a great example, Timothy. Be a great example. So we're just going to whiz through these and see how we get on. So first of these, be an example in speech. In speech, like Neil, I like to have a little sermon group before I speak to you all. So this is my sermon group this week. Evie Durling, and Evie came to my study, and she sat on one of the couches, and I said, right, Evie, I'd like to run my sermon past you if that's okay. She said, your books? I said, yeah, what about my books, Evie? She said, they're a bit messy. I said, yeah, okay, Evie, I need to go, let's do the sermon. She said, they're not as nice as my daddy's books. If we're talking about preaching, my daddy preaches without notes, by which time I'm feeling a little bit, insecure. And I said, well, that's nothing, because I can preach without thinking. Exactly, says Evie. And then Evie gave me one of those looks, which caused me back to have a flashback to leading the youth work here, and another young lady who gave me a similar look 25 years ago. All of us have said things without thinking. Who here cannot say that they've not said something, and as soon as the words have left their lips, have regretted them ever entering their head? That's why James talks about The tongue being fire, positive, but also negative. Someone wise once said that we should be quick to listen, slow to anger, and even slower to speak. Next slide, please, Andy. It's easy to forget the impact of words, isn't it? I mean, when we speak, what's our tone? What's our tone on text, on Facebook, on Instagram, and indeed on Twitter? Is it grumbling or thankfulness, character assassination, or encouragement? The writer to the Hebrews says these words, "But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." Encourage one another daily. It's the easiest thing in the world to be negative. I could write 1,000,000 negative emails every day. It's the easiest, laziest thing to do. And I know I'm not alone in that. Encourage one another daily. Encouragement, so powerful in a world of negativity. Yesterday, I was helping to run the event where Jackie got her awards, and people were saying some nice things to me. But the thing that will live with me of yesterday was an email I got from a friend who's, well, it's Gareth Allen. I couldn't think of a way to describe Gareth Allen to you. Gareth says, "Dave, 2 really helpful reports. I feel I have a grasp of the main things and where we need to do our thinking and praying hardest. Thank you, Gareth." Mate, I can live on that all day, all week, because encouragement is a powerful thing in the world of negativity. If you catch someone doing a great thing, then praise them for it. And also, let me just say this while we're thinking about speech, and time is running away with me, but let me just say this. Friends, can I encourage you to be realistic when you tell your Christian story? It's so easy when we want to tell our non-Christian friends about how great it is to be in relationship with Jesus to get carried away. Make Jesus your choice and drive a Rolls Royce and all that nonsense. Be realistic. Don't be over positive. I was down the pub the other night. I was invited down there. I thought I ought to go and see some of my friends who aren't here this morning. And I spent some time talking to a friend of mine called Mac. And we talked about he's not a Christian. We talked about the church, and, you know, on occasions I had to say, yeah, you're right, we've got lots to apologise for. There is something attractive about integrity. There's something attractive about integrity. Next slide, please, Andy. Be an example in life. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather someone walk with me than merely point the way. The world is looking for living sermons. Will my friends read the Bible? Unlikely. Will they come here and listen to me preach? Really unlikely. The world is looking for living sermons, lives that they can look at. Yeah, sure. The world will scrutinise lives. People have an inbuilt hypocrisy detector. Wait for the next few weeks and listen to the political pundits rip people apart. Be an example in life. And when you mess up, hold your hands up, confess, and move on. This week I wrote a text to a young lad who's going to become my son-in-law in the summer. We're planning this wedding, and I'm a bit of an idiot. And there's certain things in this wedding that I would really love and I think are fantastic, but it's not my wedding day. And I may not have been the best version of myself. And when I say may not have been, you know what I mean. And I just simply wrote him a text and said, mate, I've always said to you, I'm a pretty straightforward kind of guy. What you see is what you get. And sometimes that ain't all that pretty. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've got my hopes and my dreams and I'm selfish and I'm sorry. And he wrote back and said, thank you. Thank you. Be an example in life. And when you screw up, confess and move on. Paul talks about it being a fragrance. Well, when you're 250 pounds, it's difficult to think of yourself as a fragrance, but maybe it's a gentle touch in an aggressive world, a kind act in selfish culture. This next guy is getting a lot of flack just at the moment, a guy called Kanye West, who's released this album, Jesus is King, and everybody's trying to work out what he's all about, what he's doing, what he's saying. Is he taking the mick? Is he just getting some money together? What's he doing? But why is it making such an impact? Because Kanye West comes from that aggressive world. And somehow in this album, he begins to exhibit that gentle touch in an aggressive world. Be an example in speech, in life, and in love. Have compassion in a gutsy world. Love those people you don't really like. Because let's be honest, God, in his sense of humour, sends those people into your life just to polish you, just to refine you. When I was at college, there was, John, is there any water around here? Oh, thank you very much. When I went to college, there was a lot of people in my batch, that's the year group, and there was a guy there called Jason. Jason was a great guy, really talented, probably on some sort of spectrum. Jason was awkward, he didn't really blend in, he didn't make friends easy, and Jason and I were paired together. Thank you, Jesus. And we were given this job of driving from Spurgeon's College to go and interview a minister in Paddington. That's going from Crystal Palace to Paddington, right across the middle of London. And Jason was paired with me. And for those of you who remember me being here 25 years ago, you might recognise that. Where are you going to throw that? Okay, that's fine. You have that one. He takes his Baptist thing very seriously, does John. If you were here 25 years ago, you'll remember that that was my car. The young people used to love riding in that. Right, Joe? Yeah, right, maybe not. But anyway, at Spurgeon's College, Jason and I had to get in that and get across London. And I can remember Jason walking round my car before getting into it, like this. Anyway, he gets into the car and he says to me, "You've not got a Christian bumper sticker." I said, "That's right, Jason, because this is not a Christian car." And we got in the car and we drove across London, and I love driving through London. Hyde Park Corner, oh yeah, my favourite. And it's great because in London, you know, indicators are optional. And anyway, we got there and, you know, we were, just tearing through London, and we get to Paddington. And Jason turns to me and says, "You don't drive like a Christian, do you?" I think my dignified response was, "Do you want to walk?" Jason finished college when I finished college. He went to his first church and he crashed and he burned. And he did some stupid things, and he's no longer in the ministry and he's no longer leading a church. And I don't think he's loving Jesus just now. But Jesus sends those people into our life to refine us. We need to remember that we'll never meet anyone who doesn't matter to God. From the Queen of England through to the seller of papers, the homeless guy on the street, all are created in the image of God. And how we love the least of these is how we love God. Be an example in love. Be an example in faith. The world wants to see what we believe. Hudson Taylor said these words: if there was no element of risk in that which we do for Christ, there is no need for faith. Did I have that on the slide, Andy? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, this is my fault, not Andy's. I remember bumping into a guy from Prestonwood Baptist Church, which is one of the biggest Baptist churches in America. And they were talking to me about bringing their young people to the UK on a mission trip. And that was fantastic. And I said, oh, great, do you do this every year? He said, no, usually we go to the Amazon. Now that is a mission trip. And they go to these places in the Amazon rainforest. And he said it's great because you take them to places where it's the highest concentration of poisonous snakes and poisonous insects. It's brilliant. And then what you do is you get your youth group and you get them to the edge of the swamp where the snakes and the insects are. It's brilliant. And then you say, right, everybody get across the swamp. And they all stand there going, you have got to be having a laugh. And he said, and the lesson you learn is, you've got to be first in the swamp as the youth leader, as the minister. You've got to be first in the swamp. Friends, if we want our friends to trust God, if we want our friends to take him seriously, if we even want our friends to give God a go, we've got to be first in the swamp. We've got to be first in the swamp. Be an example in faith. And lastly, be an example in purity. I've run out of time. We live in a world of money, sex, and power. I just note that when Joseph in the Old Testament, when Potiphar's wife says, "Do you fancy it?" Basically, that's what the Hebrew says. What does Joseph do? Joseph runs. He runs fast and he runs far. One of the most powerful examples I had of this growing up in this church was being around my mate's house, and we were watching this film which was violent and unhelpful, and his dad stood up and said, I don't know about you guys, but I can't do life well if I watch stuff like this. And he just walked out of the room and did something much more interesting. Be an example in purity. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in love, in life, in faith, and in purity. Friends, the most valuable thing you have to invest is your life. Be a great example. May you go through life with the imprint of Jesus upon you. Stanley, that famous reporter who looked a little bit like the guy on the right, was sent to Africa to find a missionary called Livingstone, the guy on the left. And they, as you know, they found one another. And Stanley spent loads of time with him, writing great articles and sending them home. But then came the time for him to finish his assignment. And so he wrote his last article and sent it off. And it was the day of his departure. And he writes in his diary this: if I had spent one more minute with Livingstone, I would have been compelled to become a Christian. And yet, he never spoke to me about it once. be an example. May Jesus be imprinted on your life, on our lives. God bless you. Thank you.